The floorboard groaned under my bare foot, loud enough to wake the dead. I froze instantly. I had been reaching for a glass of water, nothing more than a thirsty woman walking through her own hallway. But the light from the living room bled across the threshold of the bedroom door I hadn't meant to open. It was open just a crack. Inside, the shadows were thick and wrong. He was standing there, illuminated by the blue glow of a laptop screen. My stepson, Caleb. He wasn't sleeping. He was staring at something on the screen that made his breathing hitch in the dark. He turned his head slowly when I shifted my weight. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us breathed. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. I felt like the intruder. My mouth went dry. I should have backed out immediately. I should have said sorry and closed the door before the rest of the world knew what I saw. But the air in the room was heavy with a secret I suddenly couldn't ignore. I stepped forward instead. I told myself I was just worried. He had been quiet lately. Too quiet for a 16-year-old boy who was supposed to be full of energy and noise. His father, Mark, thought he was fine. Mark thought the house was peaceful. Mark and I had been married for 2 years, but the house still felt like 3 separate countries sharing one roof. We tried hard to blend our lives together. We bought matching towels. We set a schedule for the bathroom. We acted like we were normal. But normal was a lie we told at dinner. Caleb lived in the space between his father's expectations and his own grief. His mother had left 5 years ago. Everyone said she moved on. They said kids bounce back, but I watched him eat his meals without speaking much. I watched him stare at the wall during movies. I wanted to love him the way Mark loved him. I wanted him to see me as mom. I wore that role like a costume that was always slipping off in the wind. He called me Sarah, never anything else. It was polite. It was distant. I convinced myself the distance was his choice. Maybe he didn't want a replacement for the woman he lost. So I kept to the kitchen. I kept to the laundry. I stayed out of his business unless he asked for help. But lately, the business had started bleeding into my space. My perfume bottle was empty. I checked the counter. I thought I used the last drop. Then I noticed the scent again. It was strong near the sink, near the place where he sometimes washed his hands late at night. I told myself I was imagining it. Another day, a note I wrote for Mark was sitting on the trash can lid, crumpled inside. I smoothed it out and read it again. It was just a reminder about a bill. It shouldn't have mattered. But it felt like a breach. That was when I decided to check his room. I didn't want to snoop. I told myself I needed to find a missing charger for the garage alarm, but my hand hovered over his doorknob anyway. I remember the handle was cold against my palm. I pushed it gently. Nothing happened. He was definitely asleep. I went back to the couch and buried my face in my hands. Why was I so paranoid? Was I trying to control everything because I felt out of control? Maybe I was afraid of what he would say if he actually talked to me. Maybe I was afraid he'd tell me he hated me. A week later, the atmosphere changed. The house felt colder, even though the heat was on. Mark was gone for a business trip on Friday. He left early, kissing me goodbye like we were 2 people who weren't tired of each other. He kissed Caleb on the forehead like a king blessing a subject. We ate dinner in silence. The fork clinked against the ceramic bowl. I picked at the meatloaf, pushing the brown sauce around with my knife. Caleb didn't lift his head. Ears. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Around 11 p.m., I heard footsteps above. Not the quick shuffle of getting ready for bed. Slow feet, heavy intent. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath until they moved away again. They weren't moving toward the bathroom. They were moving toward the study. The room where we kept the important documents. The room where Mark kept his safe. My stomach dropped. I grabbed a jacket and crept up the stairs. I didn't want to catch him doing anything wrong. I just needed to make sure. I wanted to be right. If he was breaking in, I could prove I was the responsible one. I could fix the problem before Mark got back. But I wasn't thinking about Mark. I was thinking about the look in his eyes when he walked past me in the hallway. There was fear there, raw, unfiltered fear. I couldn't place it. I couldn't name it, and that scared me more than the crime. I reached the landing, The air smelled faintly of smoke, not cigarette smoke, burning paper. The smell drifted from under the study door. I opened the latch without knocking. I didn't care about boundaries anymore. The smell was getting stronger. Inside, the light was dim. Caleb was standing over the wastebasket. Papers were turning black and curling at the edges. He saw me, and his hand shook so hard he dropped the lighter. It clattered onto the wood floor. The flame died instantly, leaving a wisp of gray smoke hanging in the air. Sarah. He didn't use please. He didn't explain. Why are you burning those? My voice came out sharper than I intended. It sliced through the silence like glass breaking. I don't know what I expected. I expected him to snap. I expected a teenager's anger to explode. Instead, he just slumped. His shoulders dropped as if the weight of the ceiling finally crushed him. He didn't answer. He just stared at the burning embers in the bin. I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. The lock clicked softly, a sound of finality. The room was small and hot. My skin prickled. Caleb, what is this? I knelt beside him. I wanted to touch his shoulder. I wanted to pull him away from the fire. His skin was hot. He was sweating. Those aren't your papers. He whispered it like a prayer. They're yours. My heart hammered against my ribs. My papers. In his room. On fire. I scrambled up and dug through the bin. My fingers burned on the charred edges. I pulled one out. It was a letter, an official envelope with a stamp I recognized. Legal services. Mark didn't know I was getting a lawyer. I pulled another piece out. It was my signature, not mine, but close enough to pass. What did you do? I demanded. I felt the blood draining from my face. You forged my name? Not forge, just fixed. He looked at the floor. Mark said you weren't going to come to court for me. But I have to stay here. Stay here. Where? This house. He lifted his head and looked at me for the first time since I walked in. He wasn't afraid of me. He was terrified of losing the only ground he had left. You think I'm kicking you out? I thought he would say yes. I thought he would admit he was lying to save his own skin. I thought you wanted him to take me away. He said it with a flatness that hurt my chest. You talk about divorce so much lately. You talk about starting over. I stopped breathing. Divorce. I hadn't said a word about divorce to Mark. Not once, not even in whispers. Then I realized where he was listening. The walls were thin. The vent system ran under the floorboards. I sat down heavily on the floor, ignoring the ash on the carpet. I put my hands over my face and laughed. It was a broken sound, a jagged thing. I never said we were splitting up. I looked up at him, tears streaming freely now. I've been fighting him about bills, about stress, about sleep, but I haven't left. Not once. He blinked, confused. You look like you're running away, he said simply. And you hate me for being the reason. The accusation hung in the air. He had taken all the chaos of my unhappiness and twisted it into a weapon against himself. He thought he was the cause. He thought his existence was the anchor dragging me down. I stood up and walked over to him. I took his hands in mine. They were shaking less now, but they were cold. Listen to me. There is no divorce. There is no plan. I squeezed his palms. I am mad about the mess in the kitchen. I am stressed about work, but I am staying. Caleb pulled his hands back quickly. He wiped his eyes on his sleeve. Then why the papers? He asked. Because Mark was going to move me out. He wanted to sell this house to buy a bigger one for his new project. He wants to rent out our bedrooms to students, to pay for his dream. I hadn't known that either. Mark had been showing me listings. I thought they were ideas, casual talks. He never mentioned selling this house to me properly, but you knew. He gestured to the bin. I saw the emails. On your phone, when you forgot it. I felt the shame wash over me. I had left it unlocked on the coffee table. He had been scanning screens like a soldier in a war zone. I should have trusted him. I looked at him with a clarity I had missed for months. I need you to stop burning things, I said firmly. If we fight, We fight together. If we lose this house, we leave together." He nodded slowly. He picked up the lighter from the floor and put it in his pocket. "I won't burn anymore," he promised. "But don't ask me to call you Mom." I smiled sadly. I understood. Names were borders. Borders were safety. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll just be Sarah." The next morning, Mark woke up to a very different house. I told him exactly what was happening. I told him we were not selling. I told him Caleb knew the plans and he was scared. Mark yelled. He denied everything. He said I was twisting facts, but he also looked at Caleb. He saw the bruises on his wrists, not from hitting, from gripping too hard on the railings when he panicked. Mark broke down that afternoon. He apologized. Not nicely, but he apologized. The house settled, the smoke cleared, but the damage was done. I had crossed a line and come back. He had saved me from a mistake I hadn't even realized I was making. Caleb went back to school. I went back to work. But the distance between us didn't return. The awkwardness remained, but it was a comfortable awkwardness now. We knew the worst parts of each other. We knew the secrets. I still hear him moving around the house at night. Sometimes I sit up and listen, but I don't open the door. I don't check. I just listen to the breathing in the next room. It sounds steady now. He knows he belongs here. I know he knows the truth. I think I learned more from him that night than he did from me. We built a bridge over the ashes of that paper pile, but some things burn and they never grow back. Trust takes years to build. It took minutes for Caleb to realize I wasn't the enemy. It took him years to believe it. We sit at the table now. We eat dinner. He laughs sometimes, really laughs. Not the polite smile, but the kind that reaches his eyes. I watch him. I wonder if he ever forgives me for the phone, for the emails, for the times I almost gave up. Sometimes he looks at me across the table, and for a second the silence isn't heavy. It's just there, like the space between heartbeats. He leaves his plates in the sink. I clean them up. He thanks me. I say you're welcome. It doesn't sound performative anymore. I remember the way the blue light hit his face in the dark. I remember the fear. It sits in my memory like a stone in a river, smoothed by time, but still sharp enough to cut if I slip. I won't slip again. I made a promise to myself that night while the smoke still curled in my hair. I will never leave him in the dark again, even when he tries to hide in it. Even when he tries to burn the evidence of his pain to keep me from seeing. Now he knows I see him, and that scares him more than the fire ever did. But he keeps coming back. He keeps sitting at the table, and I keep waiting for the day he calls me Mom. I won't push, I won't demand, but I am waiting. One day I will know if he truly believes me. Until then, I will protect the secret. I will hold the truth in my hands. And I will watch him heal. I catch his eye sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking. I give him a nod. Just a small tilt of the chin. A signal that says I'm here. He gives me a small nod back. A secret handshake in the middle of a crowded room. We survived the fire. Now we have to live with the warmth it brought. It's uncomfortable at first. It burns if you get too close. But it keeps us alive.